Hi, everyone. This is Phil Travis, and this is week 6 here at EOU for History 445, Post-War Europe. This week we are reading from our book, our Jute book on post-war Europe, chapter 12 and 13. This week we have, of course, our discussion forum. Aside from our discussion forum, our major assignment this week is our paper proposal. Of course, in this class we have a 7 and a 9 page research paper that we write. So as making a step towards getting us thinking about this paper, I want us to do a proposal. I have a template guide in Canvas for you, so follow the paper template guide, the proposal guide, so that you make sure that you do this right. I really want you thinking about I want you doing some basic research, and I want you to think about this kind of skeleton of the paper. You know, what are you going to argue? I want a historical argument that demonstrates analysis. What does this mean for us today? I want to see some academic research. I don't want to see, dictionary.com sources. I want to see you, go to our library website, use the databases, go to JSTOR, for example. We can all log into our library website with our credentials because we're students at EOU, and we can access JSTOR and gain access to numerous academic articles. So I want to see some academic research. There's also quite a bit of digitized primary source documents out there that we can also access. So I'd like to see you do some good research. I want to see at least 5 academic sources on the paper proposal. I want to see a thesis statement that demonstrates that there's going to be some argument and historical analysis here. I don't want to see papers that are just summaries of facts. I want to see research, analysis, and argument. I also would like to see you not only pose some leading questions, and the questions you think about, asking should be questions that provide an answer to a bigger argument. They shouldn't be like statement of fact kind of thing. It shouldn't be a question that you could Google search. It should be a question that, conveys a depth of analysis, if you will. I also want to see you write the first 2 paragraphs of your research paper. And I really want to see, because this will help you make the first steps on your research paper. And then you'll get, really probably the most important part of your paper begun. Arguably, the most important part of a paper like this is the introduction. Because the introduction is where you make your argument. It's where you grab your audience or you lose your audience. And you want to grab your audience, right? And you want to draw them in and explain to them your argument and why your argument matters, right? So in the introduction, I want you to write 2 paragraphs on your proposal, okay? The first paragraph I want to be what we call a narrative hook. And a narrative hook is kind of like the paragraph where you draw the reader in. It's the first paragraph that you read. The author, Jute, the author of our book, uses a lot of narrative hooks, if you notice. Every first paragraph to every chapter is sort of, rather than going into the nuts and bolts of an argument, it's sort of a pull-you-in argument. This event happened and this person did such and such on this day and so forth. Another way to think about a narrative hook, if that doesn't make sense, I'm laughing because as I said it, I was like, does that make sense? Another way to think about a narrative hook is, give the history through the viewpoint of the people experiencing it. And a narrative hook doesn't have to be that way. But sometimes if you find a good newspaper article or a primary source, and you can kind of provide sort of a look into a historical event from the eyes of one of the actors, right? Describe what they're experiencing, describe the things that are happening, describe the time and the place, then it's kind of telling a narrative that draws the reader in. And then in the second paragraph, you lay out your argument, right? And you explain the nuts and bolts of your argument. This is what this paper is about. This is what this paper will argue. This is why this paper is going to argue this. And then after that, of course, in the paper, you'll provide your evidence, and then eventually you'll conclude after providing your evidence and making your argument. So I would like to see you in the paper proposal write the introduction of your paper, the narrative hook paragraph, and the argument paragraph. So I'd like to see you guys do all that on the paper proposal. Give me the topic, the thesis, some leading questions, introduction, which I'm calling the significance section, but it's really write the introduction, the narrative hook, and the argument, and then give me a list of 5 or 6 academic sources to demonstrate that you're doing some of the research here. Okay, and that'll be due Sunday at midnight, just like the other items. Other than that, factoid for this week. Remember, email me by Wednesday, no later, for your extra point towards the test score at the end of the term. The factoid for this week is this. So the 1960s is generally associated with the emergence of a movement called the New Left. And the New Left emerged in multiple parts of the world, but particularly in Europe and the United States. And the New Left was made up of a number of different groups of people. But in Great Britain, and this is the factoid, one of the original founders of the New Left in Great Britain was an individual by the name of E.P. Thompson. And it's interesting because E.P. Thompson is, one of the most famous historical authors of probably the last 40, 50 years. If you take a graduate course in historiography, you will almost certainly read E.P. Thompson's book, The Making of the English Working Class, which came out in 1963. And E.P. Thompson is generally used as, an example of Marxist historical scholarship. E.P. Thompson was a member of the Communist Party of Great Britain before he, left that and became part of the New Left. And the New Left as a movement was kind of a movement that was largely disenchanted by, Eastern communism's interpretation of Marxism. They began to see the Soviet Union for the brutality that it was. Stalin, gulags, purges, Stalingrad, these types of things. And de-Stalinization, not only fractured the sort of romanticized image of the Soviet Union that many people might have possessed on the left, but it also led to revolts in places like, of course, Poland and Hungary. And in the 1960s, we see the emergence of a group unrelated to communist movements called the New Left, which was sort of a leftist movement positioned between sort of Marxism and, social democracy, the more moderate sort of reform socialist of social democracy and the revolutionary Marxist. And in the middle was kind of this group, the New Left. And the New Left was brought to be by many individuals, but one of them is a guy named E.P. Thompson. And E.P. Thompson was a British historian, wrote a famous and massive, the book is huge, it's like 900 pages. It's called The Making of the English Working Class, and it was an example of Marxist history written by E.P. Thompson. It's a landmark, influential book, and again, most historiography classes in graduate school today still ask students to read or look at E.P. Thompson's The Making of the English Working Class. And he was not only, the book came out in 1963, and he was not only a landmark historian, but also one of the founders of the New Left in Great Britain. All right, guys, email me that factoid no later than Wednesday by midnight. Get your extra point towards one of the tests at the end of the term, and let's have a great week. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, guys.